So this is Claudia Fallis. I'm with the Center for Living Studies in Washington, D.C. I'm here today with Norman Sandridge. He's a tenured professor at Howard University, and we're here to talk to him about his research. He works on a lot of interesting projects. So Norman, can you start off just telling us a little bit about your area of interest?
Sure. I am first and foremost a Hellenist with emphasis on Greek and Latin, or sorry, Greek tragedy and Greek epic. But within that field, I'm especially interested in leadership study, both the history of leadership and the theories of leadership. What is an ideal leader? Mm-hmm. And also more recently, I've become very interested in leadership and the emotions, and I can say more about what that is whenever you like.
Great. So, well, let's just focus a little bit on what got you interested in this topic, and is there any specific text that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I wrote my dissertation on a lesser-known epic by Apollonius of Rhodes, a 3rd century BC epic poet, and he wrote about Jason and the Argonauts. His work is called the Argonautica, and so my dissertation was all about Jason's leadership in the Argonautica, and I came at this question because I was kind of interested in the differences between what it means to be a hero and what it means to be a leader. And so you can sort of think of them in terms of a Venn diagram, like some of the things that heroes do could be described as leaderly, or they could be described as beneficial to the community. They're, the prominent figure in the community, often a king or a chieftain or a head warrior or something. And at the same time, though, some things that that heroes do are not particularly leaderly or beneficial to the community. And similarly, there may be some leadership traits that leaders possess that would be described as, it wouldn't be described as very heroic. So I was very much interested kind of in the overlap of that, and there are a lot of interesting problems that kind of emerge from looking at that comparison. And so that's what I did my dissertation on back in 2005. And as I was working on my dissertation, I came across a work by Xenophon that I didn't know very much about at all, called The Education of Cyrus, or the Cyropaedia. And as a result, I was just struck by what an interesting manual, as it were, or so-called mirror of princes, this work was. And so I've been working on that for the last 4 or 5 years, and I published a book on it with the Center for Hellenic Studies in 2012, and since then I've continued to work with the Cyropaedia, but also look at other ancient texts that talk about leadership and the emotions in particular. That's kind of where I am right now. So,
but this work on the Education of Cyrus makes me want to ask you about a digital project actually that you're doing. So can you talk a little bit about that? Right.
So when you write a book on something, there is probably half of the material that goes into the book doesn't make it. Half of the material that you come up with in generating the book doesn't go into the book itself. You have a leftover, and what you can often do is write a commentary of that ancient work and just use your unused material kind of as the foundation. And if you're lucky, then a commentary hasn't been written on that work for a while, and you have some rationale to do it. And so I thought, oh, this would be a nice thing to do. There are a lot of other things I want to say about the Education of Cyrus that didn't go into my book, but then I sort of stepped back and I thought, like, well, the Education of Cyrus is such a complex work. There are tons of things I don't know about it. There are tons of things I may never know about it, because it takes so many different, you have to be an expert in so many different fields to really appreciate this work, because it's written by a 4th century Athenian author, Xenophon, but it's about a 6th century Persian king. And so there are all issues of Achaemenid archaeology, Achaemenid history, Persian oral history, 4th century Greek prose, philosophical prose, contemporary Athenian history. There's just so much in this work, even though the work is ostensibly a very simple and straightforward guide to how to be a good leader.
Because usually I think people think about Xenophon and they're thinking, this is easy reading. Right. That's sort of the immediate response.
Xenophon is often seen as the 3rd semester equivalent of the Latin author Caesar, who's just a chance to sort of test your grammar and enjoy Xenophon's very simple and elegant style. But it turns out that simplicity is much more complex, and it's hard to obtain that simplicity. So there were so many questions emerging from my closer reading of the text that I realized I would really like to do something more collaborative. Like there are experts out there who know far more than I do about many aspects of this text, and so I thought, do something collaborative. These days, if you're going to do something collaborative, if you're going to aggregate all of the wise things and intelligent things that have been said about a work, it's best to do it online. And so, fortunately, I had some friends and colleagues who were willing to think through with me what a collaborative online commentary might look like. And so the end result is it's not an end, it's still an ongoing thing, but the end result is Cyrus's Paradise, this collaborative online commentary on the education of Cyrus, designed to not only aggregate all of the known things about this text, but enable scholars to engage in discussion in real time, to enable them to share the results of their research in real time, to edit one another, and really just create a living discussion, an ongoing living discussion about what this text is about, and hopefully bring together some scholars who wouldn't necessarily get to talk with one another very much. I mean, for the longest time, the education of Cyrus was seen very much as 4th century Greek prose, and so it was, kind of a lesser, less than Plato. Xenophon is always less than Plato, or less than Thucydides, or less than Herodotus, and now we're really seeing that, he's so much more, but we just never had the tool. We didn't have the team, really. We didn't have the collaborative working group to see all the magic going on there.
And so I see, you're using digital tools, you're using really intergenerational collaborative research that's international too, right? Because this is a project that can involve scholars, world-class scholars, and even students who are first starting to work on their Greek. You have tools on your site to allow people to practice reading, hearing the Greek, right? Make commentary, make notes. So really, this is a tool for everybody.
Right.
Really,
no, very much. The idea was to draw in Greek students at the earliest stage of their education, and by doing so, that would entice scholars to say, well, here's a venue where my comments are actually going to be read and appreciated, rather than buried away in some journal that only 50 people know about or something. But it's, so scholars have the opportunity to feature their ideas and feature their own work, and students are hopefully drawn to it because this is a chance to sort of play in the big leagues, or at least watch, to go to a major league game and see where ideas are being talked about and hashed out. So it's intergenerational is exactly the right word there, and we really envisioned this as a soup to nuts kind of experience, where you start out with just a little bit of Greek, and the interesting thing is every new scholar who comes to the text, who comes to the commentary, will experience a different commentary than even the one I've experienced, because there are new comments, there are new ideas, and there's a chance to make new connections that no one has seen so far. So it's meant to be very inviting in that way.
So can we talk a little bit more about your book, and so you were discussing that now you've become interested not just in leadership but in emotions. So
right.
How's that evolved over time?
Right. So my book was about sort of the question of what are the foundational traits of good leadership, and then I'm exploring in Xenophon the extent to which you might think of three Greek traits: philanthropia, philotimia, and philomatheia, which are the love of humanity, the love of being honored, and the love of learning. And it's an exploration of to what extent those might be seen as foundational. Like if you had these three traits, you would be good to go as a leader, properly understood. And sort of from that, I've always been interested in the emotions, particularly in pity. That's how I got interested in tragedy, and I got very interested in the emotion of thonos, the Greek word is often translated as envy. It might better be translated as something like resentment or a protectiveness. So for example, if you're eating your lunch and there's a piece of food on your plate that you haven't finished yet, and I reach across and I take the food off your plate and eat it, the feeling that you have, I think, would be called thonos in ancient Greek. It's a sense of resentment, sense of envy, and it evolves more into in competitive context, we can feel thonos for one another if we're running a race together, and I see that you're about to take the first spot or something like that. So this is an emotion that naturally occurs in leadership situations, because in most instances there can only be one leader. But as one of my friends once said to me, there are 100 senators in the United States, and every one of them has a narrative in his or her mind about how they're going to be president one day. You know, we don't often acknowledge this, but clearly they go to sleep thinking about what are the steps necessary to get to that presidency, and 50 governors doing the same thing, and who knows others. So anytime you have a situation where there's one kind of coveted leadership spot, you're going to have this emotion emerging. And so I was very much interested in how do leaders cope with that? How do they handle the emotion? If you are a leader, how do you handle the emotion in others? Like if you see two people rivaling one another, how do you overcome that? And after working through that a little bit, I started to think just more broadly, how does the leadership role color the way you process the world emotionally? So, for example, there are sort of three aspects of leadership that really, I think, color, that add color to your emotional processing. So leadership comes with authority quite often, right? If you're the leader, you can tell me what to do. So the question might be, well, if you're allowed to boss me around, do you indulge in your anger, say, more than someone other? If you didn't have that authority, you wouldn't think that, oh, I can get away with yelling at Norman, or I can get away with slighting him, or whatever. There's certain emotions you might feel that you can indulge in. So that's,
Yeah, so this actually makes me think about the Iliad, right? And Agamemnon and the start of the Iliad.
Yeah.
So has Agamemnon been a figure that's been interesting to you?
Yeah. So there's the authority side. Yes, you could certainly, and that's.
Oh, sorry, but I interrupted.
Not at all. No. So Agamemnon. This is something that the priest Calchas says, basically, like a king, is able to bear resentment, and he can lash out whenever he wants, and seemingly the implied reason is he has the license to do so. He can get away with it. And so people have to be fearful of kings. And so this leadership role changes. I mean, you could argue that both the king's emotional processing, but also the way people react to them, right?
So when you say emotional processing, I mean, are you thinking of sort of internal emotions, or you're thinking about, I guess, sort of external social relationships?
Yeah, both. I mean, just the idea that you internally you might indulge the emotion. Normally there might be a check if you don't have authority over me, and you think, oh, this interview is not going really well, I'm angry with Norman right now. Because you're not my boss, like you will say, well, I can't express that. I can't let him know that. But if you were my boss, you might be like, come on, you would show your frustration, or maybe you would take it out on me later on, or something like that. So authority itself, I think, has the ability to color one's experience. And the other two, authority, there's the prestige factor. In other words, leadership comes with certain distinction, and so that distinction might make you feel particularly proud of yourself. It might make you prone to flattery.
Can I ask a quick question? So when you say prestige, is there a certain Greek word that you have in mind that our community members might think about?
Well, we might say time, right? There's a certain status or honor that the leader has, and similarly, that I think that status has two facets to it, right? You have to guard it, and it can make you feel good when you have it, but you're also afraid of losing it, right? And so there are elements of shame, or elements of fear, or paranoia that might come in, that someone who doesn't worry about status or doesn't have a high status might not feel.
And I think about that, Garos, like I really like your example now that you gave earlier about reaching up to someone's plate.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the word Garos, in ancient Greek, so this is a word that can be used as sort of your honorific portion.
Yes.
And this is but it's a very social act.
Yeah.
When you everybody sees
my food.
You get the best piece of meat, and then other people don't want it, right? So
exactly.
That's super interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. So what's your third?
And the third is the responsibility. Like when you're put in the leadership role, you don't just get authority and prestige. The reason you get those things is because you have a certain responsibility to protect the community, to educate the community, to cause the community to prosper. That's very common expectation for ancient leaders. You make the crops grow, you make the
Right.
the animals fertile. Yeah.
So that's a super interesting point, right? So when we're thinking about leadership in the ancient world, we really need to be careful not to impose our ideas about what a good leader is going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, those are very some specific things about making the crops grow.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Absolutely.
And your sheep are going to keep giving birth in a beautiful way because you have the right leader.
Yeah. Totally.
Right?
Totally.
That's
Absolutely.
not what we think about Obama. Let's say.
Well, no. I mean, I think in some ways we do think that.
Because
right.
it's about prosperity, right?
Right. And so we have this causal relation. Whoever is in the Oval Office affects the economy, right? Yeah. The economy does well or poorly, or gas prices go up or down or something, and it's sort of a common association, I think, that we make, obviously not in the very literal agrarian way that they might have in the ancient world. So anyway, with the element of responsibility, and I'll bring this now to Agamemnon, just a priori, we might expect, okay, if you're the leader and you have greater responsibility, there's going to be more stress in your life than there is in everybody else's life. And this is something that Oedipus actually talks about in the Oedipus Tyrannus, when the community comes to him at the beginning of the play and says, we've got this plague going on, we think you might be able to fix it. And he reassures them by saying, trust me, I grieve for all of you, even though you just worry about your own individual lives. I sort of feel the communal grief. Okay.
And we hear a lot of stuff about leaders having to stay awake, right?
Right. Exactly.
Mulling over the problems.
Epimeleia is the Greek word, that attentiveness or vigilance that we still worry about. So again, to bring it back to Agamemnon, one of the questions that I'm really interested in Scroll 1 is, okay, he's sort of he has the most power of any of the Achaean kings there, but he also has the greatest responsibility. And he's reminded of this responsibility in Scroll 2 when Dream comes to him in the form of Nestor and says, by the way, you're not allowed to sleep all the time. Someone who is responsible for all of these people can't just sleep the night away. So to bring it back to Scroll 1, here's the question that I'm very interested in. Why does Agamemnon refuse Chryses' ransom?
Okay. So actually, I'm really excited that you're asking questions. So I'd actually like to turn around and pose that to our community for something to discuss within our forum. Sure. So that's great. I think. Do
you want to leave it right there?
I do. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. That's the best thing ever.
And I don't know the answer to the question right off, and I don't really know anyone. I mean, I posed it to several people, and and the thing to think about is, well, okay, if you have an answer, you have a hypothesis. What are the ramifications of that? If you think you know why he did this, how does that affect your interpretation of his behavior in the rest of Scroll 1?
So can you just say a few words about gift exchange, maybe just to give some context to people about how gift exchange normally would work in a situation like that? Or, well, maybe not gift exchange, but exchange.
Oh, like with a ransom, right? So we're told in Scroll 1 that Chryses brings a countless ransom in exchange for his daughter, and we know that this is a customary process. We learn, especially in Scroll 24, that Achilles is someone who habitually does this, right? Like he captures warriors in battle in particular. I don't think we have any accounts of him ransoming a woman back, as a matter of fact, but he'll take someone in battle, and you're basically left with the option of, do you want to kill the person because you're grieving and angry and looking to avenge, or do you say, okay, I will forego the emotional satisfaction of killing you in exchange for the satisfaction of being honored and what's the word, and enriched by this countless spoil that someone brings, or countless ransom that someone brings. Yeah.
And when we see this in the epic, I think it says, and all the people, Calchas comes and says, here, I want to give you, and it basically says, and everyone says, yeah, give the girl back.
Right.
And he says no. So it's a super fascinating question that you're posing to us and for our community. So I hope we can discuss it, and then maybe we can have you back.
Oh, I'd love to.
About
sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Norm. This is really great.
My pleasure.